What's good with y'all? Already know what time it is. It's DJR, and we got three very scary true motel horror stories by the one and only Mr. Nightmare. If y'all are new to the channel, subscribe right now. Let's check this out. Story 1.
This happened to me about 2 years ago when I was driving home from New York down to Tennessee to visit one of my friends from college. I made the trip alone because I actually like driving long distance by myself. I usually just listen to podcasts or music the whole way and stop whenever I feel tired. I left early in the morning thinking I could probably make the whole drive in one shot, but by the time it got late, I realized I was way too exhausted to safely keep driving. It was around 1 in the morning at that point, and I was somewhere in Virginia off a highway I don't remember anymore. I pulled off at one of those blue sign exits that only has a gas station, a food place, and a couple old motels. I chose the cheapest motel because I honestly just needed somewhere to sleep for a few hours. The place looked pretty rough from the outside. It was one of those 2-floor motels where every room faces the parking lot. You know, the motel from every scary movie ever. Half the lights outside were out, and there were barely any cars there. Slow night, I guess. I almost left and found another place, but I was so tired, and honestly, I was looking for a bed, not some glamorous resort. The front office was behind thick glass, even though it was open. The guy working there looked like he was in his 50s. He barely even looked up when I walked in. I paid for the room, got my key card, and asked if they had many vacancies. He said most of the rooms upstairs were empty. I remember that because it made me feel a little better knowing there wouldn't be people making noise all night. Oh boy, the irony of that. My room was on the second floor near the far end of the building. The room was old-fashioned, but for the money, that was expected. There was a weird smell to be expected in an old hotel or motel. The room was humid as hell, but the AC made such a horrible rattling noise that I just left it off. I honestly considered just sleeping in my car instead, but I was already there and too tired to care anymore. I locked the door, shut the blinds. I took a shower and laid down on the bed with the TV on low volume. I was in bed for around 20 minutes before I started hearing arguing next door. Sounded like a couple fighting. Oh, great. The walls were thin enough that I could hear muffled voices, but not clearly enough to make out full sentences. I was annoyed because I thought it was going to keep me awake all night. One voice sounded deeper and angry, while the other sounded softer. The weird thing was the softer voice didn't sound female exactly. It sounded like someone mimicking a woman's voice, an obvious higher-pitched voice coming from a man. The argument kept going back and forth for a while. One voice would get loud and aggressive, and then the other would respond sounding serious, and then the other would respond sounding nervous. I started noticing something strange, though. The timing between the voices felt suspiciously perfect. There was never any overlap, like in basically any real fight. Each voice waited perfectly for the other to finish. I turned my TV volume down and sat there listening closer. That's when it hit me, that it was one guy doing both voices. Once I realized, I couldn't unhear it. The deeper voice sounded natural, but the softer voice sounded like the same man trying to imitate somebody else, I guess a female. I remember feeling this weird pit in my stomach because it suddenly changed the entire situation from an annoying argument to something seriously disturbing. No matter how I tried to explain it away or rationalize it, I would realize it just didn't make any sense. The so-called argument kept going for another few minutes before suddenly stopping completely for there to just be silence. I remember laying there, staring at the ceiling, hoping maybe the guy had finally gotten tired of whatever the hell he was doing. Then I heard a few slow knocks on the wall beside my bed. A fist hitting the wall like you'd knock on a door. My head shot to the left. Then I heard this muffled voice through the wall saying, "I hear you in there." I held my breath. Then the guy knocked again and said the same thing again, like he was waiting for acknowledgement. He was trying to do some creepy, playful voice, like he found something funny. I wasn't having any of this. I grabbed the remote and turned the TV volume up, trying to drown him out. For maybe 30 seconds, there was no sound at all. Then I heard the vibration of a door opening outside. Hearing that instantly made my heart start racing because I knew he had left his room. I muted the TV and listened carefully. I could feel the vibration of footsteps on the balcony outside approach my room. My blinds were fully shut except for a tiny crack near the edge where they didn't fully meet the wall. I kept staring at that crack, wondering if I should look or not. Part of me thought I was just making the situation scarier in my head than it actually was. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I walked slowly to the window and pulled the blinds apart just enough to see outside. The second I looked through, I saw a man standing right outside my window trying to look in. His face was so close to the glass that it made me jump backward immediately. We definitely made eye contact for a split second. His eyes looked wide open. The second I moved away from the window, he started making these weird voices outside. I promise this when I say he sounded like he was imitating characters. I don't know what characters, but he was having a whole creepy voice acting practice outside my motel room door. Then he started knocking on my door while changing his voice over and over. 1 second he sounded high-pitched and childish, then suddenly deep and angry. I remember one of the voices sounding like an exaggerated southern accent. It would have sounded ridiculous, maybe even funny in any normal situation, but hearing it outside my motel room at nearly 2 in the morning terrified me. This was obviously a sick, mentally ill person. The knocking kept getting harder. Not enough to break the door down, but enough that I thought the whole motel could hear it. I called the front office immediately and told the guy that somebody outside my room was acting insane and wouldn't leave me alone. The guy sounded irritated at first until he probably heard the banging through the phone. Then his tone changed and he said he'd come up right away. The guy outside kept switching voices and knocking for another minute or two. Then suddenly it stopped completely. I looked through the peephole and saw him speed walking back into the room beside mine. A few seconds later, the motel worker came upstairs carrying a flashlight and his other hand on his holster. He knocked on the door next to mine after seeing the guy speed off into that room, and he started trying to talk to the guy inside. I couldn't hear everything clearly, but he kept asking him to open the door. There was no answer at all from inside. The worker stood there for maybe a minute before finally coming over to me. I opened the door and explained everything that happened. The worker hesitated for a second before saying the guy had been staying there for a while. That answer alone made me want to leave immediately. I asked if I could switch rooms, and he said yes. He moved me to a room downstairs near the front office, right by my car. I grabbed my few belongings as fast as possible and followed him down there. The new room was basically identical to the first one, except not next to a mentally ill person. I remember feeling relieved once I locked myself inside because I figured there was no way the guy would bother me again after management got involved. I turned the TV on quietly and sat awake for a while, replaying the whole thing in my head. Eventually, exhaustion caught up to me and I started drifting off. I don't know how much time passed before I woke up again, but it was still dark outside. What woke me up was the sound of someone outside the room. I looked toward the window and saw a shadow move past the crack in the blinds. Then a few seconds later, it passed again. Not this again. I carefully moved closer to the window without making noise and looked through the crack. It was the same guy from upstairs. He was creepily walking past my room over and over again.
What?
The weird part was he wasn't making voices anymore. He wasn't knocking either. He just kept walking by while looking toward the room every time he passed. I remember feeling even more uncomfortable because now he seemed calm. I watched him do this maybe 4 or 5 times before he eventually disappeared toward the back of the motel. I didn't sleep again after that. The second the sun started coming up, I packed all my stuff, threw it in the car, and left without even returning the key card. I stopped at a gas station down the road for coffee and realized my hands were still shaking. People are weird and downright dangerous. Staying at a creepy motel is perhaps how to do a speed run of meeting those people. I will not stay at one again.
Story 2.
So just to preface, this happened in 2022 when I was a freshman in college. I'm from Central Texas and went to Texas State University. My family had to come pick me up from my dorm during spring break so we could go on a road trip to Oklahoma. Why Oklahoma? Well, there's a lot of Native American history there, and my stepmom has some Native American ancestry. Anyway, we spent some time in Oklahoma before deciding we were kind of bored there, so we drove to Branson. This road trip was only us girls, so my dad did not come with us. It was me, my 3 sisters, my stepmom, and my grandma. Once we finished up in Branson and the week-long break was coming to an end, we started our drive back to my college. The drive obviously couldn't be done in one night alone, so around 8 p.m., we decided to stop at a random motel on the side of the highway to get some sleep. We checked in and paid, but before settling in, we decided to get some pizza. Before leaving, we dropped our stuff off in our rooms. My grandma called us asking what the room number was so she could change real fast. We were standing in the lobby when she called, and my sister told her the room number out loud. That's when I noticed this man just standing at the entrance of the building. I'm very hyper aware of things because I'm scared of everything, so I always scan around and make sure nothing feels out of the ordinary. This man was wearing a black knitted sweater and black pants. I asked my sister why she thought he was standing there like that without doing anything. She brushed it off, but I didn't. At that point, I started getting even more nervous because I realized she had just said our room number out loud while this man could clearly hear her since the motel wasn't very big at all. We had to walk past him to leave, and when we did, I made eye contact with him that still sends shivers down my spine to this day, but that was it for the moment. We came back around 10 or 11 p.m. By then, we were exhausted from driving all day and just wanted to sleep. Me and my 2 sisters walked into the motel while my other sister, stepmom, and grandma stayed outside getting things from the car. When we walked in, I saw that guy again. This time, he was sitting in the far back corner of the lobby where there were TVs. That whole section was dark with no lights on. He was just sitting there doing nothing. That freaked me out even more. To make things worse, my grandma called again asking for the room number, and once again, my sister said it out loud right in front of the man. I started walking a little faster and noticed the man was now on his phone talking to someone. I couldn't hear what he was saying because he was whispering. We went up to the second floor where our rooms were. 2 of my sisters were in one room, and my other sister, stepmom, and grandma were in another room. The rooms weren't directly next to each other. There was one room separating them. We went into our room, and everything seemed fine for a little while. We were just laying on our phones getting ready for bed. Maybe 20 minutes later, we heard a knock on the door. I had already been telling my sisters how scared I was, so this immediately freaked me out because I thought it was that creepy man from downstairs. Thankfully, it was my stepmom. The second we opened the door, she rushed inside. That instantly triggered alarm bells in my head. I asked her what happened. She told us to start packing immediately, and I could tell she was dead serious. So we started packing. While we were packing, she explained that she had opened her door to put some trash outside and was suddenly face to face with a man standing silently against the wall right beside the door. When she opened it, he didn't even look surprised. He just stared at her for a second. Then she said the worst part. After staring at her, he calmly walked into the room separating our 2 rooms. That completely sent me over the edge. We all started leaving the motel while my stepmom went to the front desk to ask for a refund. Surprisingly, they actually gave her one after she explained the situation. After that, we walked outside, only to see the same guy stepping out of the elevator and heading back into the lobby. Once outside, we noticed another man who looked like he was trying to break into cars, and when I say that, I mean it. He had his hands cupped against windows looking inside, pulling on door handles and jiggling them trying to open the doors. I was so shocked by everything happening that I caught myself just standing there frozen. I guess we were being kind of loud because he suddenly looked over at us while we were getting into the car. He then looked toward the motel entrance and motioned his head like he was signaling someone to come outside. Thank God by then we had all gotten into the car already because I watched all of this happen from the window. The first creepy guy I had noticed earlier walked outside and started talking to the other men while they kept looking over at our car. We still hadn't driven away yet because my stepmom had called my dad to explain what was happening. And honestly, we didn't even know where to go at that point or who would take us in that late at night. Then a third man appeared. At that point, there were now 3 men slowly walking toward our car. I begged my stepmom to start driving. I guess she was panicking and didn't know what to do because everyone in the car was yelling at her to go. We finally sped off and kept driving until around 3 a.m. before finding another motel to stay at. That motel had roaches, but honestly, I'd take roaches over what we just escaped from.
No! I don't take no roaches. I do not like no type of bugs, insects, none of that, bro. You think I'm finna be somewhere with roaches, bro? Get out of here, bro.
and kept driving until around 3 a.m. before finding another motel to stay at. That motel had roaches, but honestly, I'd take roaches over what we just escaped from.
Bro, imagine if you sleep and a roach just crawl on.
I still don't know what those men were planning to do, or if they even had a plan at all. But based on the way that first man acted all night, I'm incredibly glad we left before finding out.
Story 3.
So if you've never stayed at a motel, they're basically a hotel's smaller, broker little cousin. Compared to a hotel, they're usually completely bare bones. You just get a bed to sleep on, a bathroom, and that's it. But that's the beauty of them sometimes if you don't want to spend hotel dollars. I feel like the 2 times you book a motel are when you're on a road trip, or if you're on a long vacation and want to offset the costs for a hotel with a motel for part of the trip. So my girlfriend Julie and I were the first example. We were driving down to Florida, which is a 17-hour drive for us. I insisted on driving all the way through or just sleeping in the car, but she didn't want to do that, understandably. When we were about 11 hours into the drive, it was dark, late, and I was feeling that feeling of struggling to keep my eyes open. We had already pinned a motel on the map half an hour earlier that Julie found. It was about a half mile off the highway. Julie was already asleep. I would wake her up when we got to the motel. Julie already booked us a reservation for the motel. Seeing 2 minutes left on the screen was a huge relief. I pulled us off the highway and eventually into the parking lot of the motel. It was kind of dead in there. I think there was one other car, and honestly, it could have been the front office employees. I woke Julie up, and I told her I'm going to check us in. I went to the little front office, and there was a woman sitting in there. She looked tired and disheveled, but she still gave me a smile and greeted me. I think she was sleeping, but then got up and went to the office to greet us for the reservation. She gave me the key and told me the room number, room 5. It was the far corner on the ground level. Julie and I brought our small bags into the room. It was a basic motel room. We took turns in the bathroom brushing our teeth and whatever. When I went through my bag and realized my phone charger was still in the car, I got up and told Julie I'd be right back. She just gave me a little grunt like she was too tired and saying a word would use up too much energy. I opened the door and left it cracked open. I walked over to the car and pressed the button on the key fob to unlock it. The lights lit up, and I think that's when I noticed the lights in the front office were off. The lady went back to sleep, I guess. Maybe that car was hers and she lives on the property. Wouldn't surprise me. But now, the place was completely dark. It was a little eerie. Not even any traffic on the road. As I got to my car, I dug around looking for my charger. I have the new iPhone with the USB-C port. Julie has the old one, and she always likes to unplug my phone so she could connect to CarPlay. So I took a minute looking for it till I found it in the center compartment. I guess she put it there. I closed the door, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw someone right by the door to our room. It was a man. I left the door cracked open just as a subconscious habit so I wouldn't get locked out, even if they weren't automatic locking doors. I jogged over to make it clear I was there before this man entered the room or something weird. I have to admit, this man was large. Not just tall, but big frame too. He had on a long trench coat that did not fit the mildly chilly weather. As I got close to the door, it really looked like he was planning on opening the door. When he heard me coming, he turned around. The man from the start smiled and had a very soft demeanor. The way he spoke was so soft that instead of being calming, it was off-putting. He asked me how I was doing tonight. Mind you, it was like past 1 a.m. I could read something weird in his intentions with his small talk, so I deflected it and skipped to the important question, if there even was one, which was, "What are you doing walking around so late? Are you staying here?" He shot back his answer quickly in the same soft voice, saying, "Oh, I'm staying upstairs. Just going for a stroll." I nodded, and then smiled back and said, "Well, enjoy your walk. Have a good night." He smiled and nodded, and then I went inside and shut the door. I was pretty quick to lock it. Julie was in bed already, snoring. She sleeps like a baby, otherwise, I would have been talking to her about how weird that encounter just was. I stood by the door with my ear up to it. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to hear footsteps walking away or not. All I know is, I didn't. Was he still standing there? I was scared to know, but I had to. I got on my knees, literally, and crawled over to the window, and very delicately moved the curtain a bit to the side, just enough at an angle to see in front of the door of the room. He was there. He was actually standing in front of our motel room door as if he was just staring at it. I lay on the floor like that for 10 minutes. He wouldn't move. It was like I was having a staring contest with him, and he was having a staring contest with our door. I eventually said this and crawled over to the bed. When I got into the bed, I shook Julie awake but told her to be quiet. She was groggy until I explained everything about that encounter and that he's still outside the door. I didn't want to scare her, but I also didn't want to be alone with the situation, and I knew she wouldn't believe me if I didn't tell her. I whispered at her to go crawl to the window and look out it. She said I was scaring her and to stop, but I begged her to go look so she'd believe me. She gave in and got on her knees and crawled to the window where I moved the curtain. She looked out to the door and said, "He's not there." I said, "Look harder. Are you sure?" And then she gasped, if not shrieked. She got up and ran back to the bed. I honestly panicked and said, "What is it? What did you see?" She replied to me to go look out the window at the rooms across the parking lot. I crawled back to the window and looked around, and I saw it very quickly. The guy in the trench coat was across the parking lot. He was standing still, but still facing our room. Actually, he was facing the window, I know it, like he saw me watching him. I looked for 30 seconds and he didn't move. I yanked the curtain shut. I told Julie I'm freaking the f out. I grabbed a blunt object just to keep by the bed secretly. I didn't want Julie seeing that and realizing I was expecting things to get physical. We waited in the bed for like an hour, and at some point in that time, we thought we heard footsteps walk by outside, but we couldn't be sure. All I know is we both agreed we heard something outside by the window. The terrifying thought that he was outside our window the entire time was actually sick. Part of me just sensed it, that he was right outside. It was so late at this point, and we were so shot from the drive that I think we just faded away without realizing it. We woke up the next morning, actually relieved we made it through the night. We put our stuff in the car, and I went to the front desk. The same lady was there. I think she owned the place. I returned the key and told her about the man in the trench coat, and how he was creepily walking around and then standing outside our door for 10 minutes. The woman looked scared and surprised when I told her this. She said she knew of no such man. She also said we were the only guests that night. When I asked, she said she had no cameras either. Julie and I thanked the woman, and we got the f out of there. I almost felt bad for that woman, leaving her there alone. But honestly, Julie and I didn't want to be there another second. It was just an extremely strange night. A once-in-a-lifetime creepy experience that we'll forever tell at gatherings.
Man. That is it for this video right here. Y'all let me know in the comments down below how y'all feel about this, and also comment down below what y'all think I should react to next. If y'all are new to the channel, subscribe right now. I love y'all. Stay blessed, and we out of here. See y'all in the next one.